Hello, hail, and welcome back to Astrology 101. This is Lecture 3. We're talking about the second half of the Zodiac this time. We're going to go over the last 6 signs plus a bonus sign. I mentioned Ophiuchus in the first lecture, and I feel like I have finally done enough charts for people who have a prominent Ophiuchus placement that I have characterized it to some extent. Obviously, that's something that's going to be evolving since it's a sign that's only recently come into prominence. So we'll talk about it, and your feedback is welcome. And if you'd like to leave comments about any of the things we discuss on this lecture, then please feel free. So let's dive right in. This time this is probably gonna be a shorter lecture than the previous one because we don't have to go over what it means, the whole zodiac together. Instead, we're just gonna talk about the last couple of signs. So first, the first sign in the upper hemisphere is Libra. Its associations are with the scales or the peacemaker. The solar month is from the 23rd of September to the 22nd of October. It aligns with the kidneys and the UI tract, and its ruling planet is Venus. Some of the keywords for Libras: balance, harmony, seeker of self-completion, diplomatic, urbane, romantic. So these are the people who are easy to get along with, fairly balanced, but at the same time, because everything seems like something they would enjoy, they can be indecisive and even gullible. They're very flirtatious, which can be a bad thing, in relationships if they're making their partner jealous, that sort of thing. And their challenge in life is to find balance, but balance is often something that comes naturally to them. So it's not just finding balance, but generating balance, having that balance that they achieve extend outward to the people around them. Libra represents cardinal air, so you can think about what that means. It's in the quadrant of water, so it's the air of water. I'm not exactly sure. I know maybe that would correspond with like steam or something like that. You can come up with your own analogy to make sense of what that energy means to you. They're very particular about the way the world moves. They like refinement. They like beautifully constructed things, but they're not like overly logical or anal retentive like Virgos are. This is more just about their tastes and their preferences. Their emotions are typically very rational, but not always. So it's more like finding rationality in the irrational. The imagery invoked in the processes of the mind, they like to visualize things. They often like to architect beautiful things. This sign represents the balance between masculine and femininity, so androgyny also. Think the sperm and the egg, masculine sign with a feminine ruling planet, right? So that's Libra. Germination of ideas. So often Libras will run think tanks and that sort of thing. They're very non-confrontational. When they're unable to think their way out of a situation, they would prefer to keep the peace than engage in a discussion with somebody. Scorpio. Scorpios get a bad rep, probably for a good reason, actually, because Scorpios tend to be pretty forceful and manipulative. But that's not always a bad thing. You can manipulate somebody negatively just as easily as you can manipulate somebody positively. Now, I have Pisces prominently in my chart, so I tend to avoid Scorpios. But people who are very firm in who they are, like Libras or Tauruses, they would get along with Scorpios just fine, And they could actually find the presence of a Scorpio to be motivational. So it all depends on, personal preference. So the associations for Scorpio, obviously the scorpion, that's the shape of the constellation, but also the detective. Their solar month is from the 24th of October through the 22nd of November, and this sign aligns with the genitals. Its ruling planet is Pluto, though it was originally Mars, but when we discovered Pluto is like the double of Mars, right? So that's, I think I said that right. Yeah. So keywords, it's determined, forceful, emotional. It's the water of water. So very emotional, but not like how we'll talk about Pisces is emotional, and not like how Cancer was emotional. Cancers are more, the difference between a Cancer and a Scorpio is seeming on the surface not very large, right? Because they both are kind of secretive. They both like to keep their emotions to themselves, but the Cancer energy is more healing and giving, whereas Scorpio energy often is more demanding and taking. You can think about it kind of like, a Scorpio as being like a huge waterfall, and if you go over the side, you might not be able to resurface because of the weight of the water falling down on top of you. It's force. It's the destructive nature of water. So the cons are jealousy, resentfulness, compulsiveness. People that have Scorpio prominently in their chart often have OCD, and they tend to be manipulative, for better or worse. That's why that's in both categories. The challenge for Scorpios is involvement. Scorpios tend to be very introverted people, so it's hard for them to want to be involved and to care about the situation around them. It's very interesting because normally when you think of water, you think of empathy and healing, and Scorpio really is more like fire than water, and people often think that Scorpio is a fire sign, but it's not. But it's the water of water. So some associate 3 symbols with this sign. I don't personally buy that. They say that it's the scorpion and the eagle, which both make sense to me. But then they also say that the phoenix aligns with the Scorpio, and I think the phoenix aligns more with Ophiuchus. I think that Scorpio largely hogs Ophiuchus's spotlight, and that some of the traits that have been attributed to Scorpio actually belong to Ophiuchus. Scorpios also, just think of pressure, like so much pressure. Like they always have this feeling like they have something to prove, they have something to demonstrate. Scorpio represents the opportunity to learn more about who you are as a human being, from your urge to hide from the world, to that urge to soar above the world with keen eyes and strength and confidence. It's the fieriest water. It's like boiling water, which boils away and evaporates everything until there's nothing left but a burnt pan. So think of how, like that exact analogy, how when water heats up and flies away, then you're left with burnt, disgusting, stuff in your pan. That is exactly kind of this energy of Scorpio. That's where that fire of water, that fiery attitude comes from, even though it's the water of water. Scorpio also represents involvement, but less about gossip, more about self-improvement and control over self. That's a big theme for Scorpios. That's something that they might struggle with or might excel at, depending on the rest of the placement of their chart. Nothing goes unnoticed for Scorpios. They take energy from everyone and everything around them at all times, like the opposite of Cancer. They're not giving energy out, but they're taking energy in. So think like absorption and invocation, which does actually align with water. And even despite that, they mostly like to keep to themselves. They prefer to stay away from people. It's very hard to know their true selves. They don't really reveal a lot of information about themselves. And it's not always in a bad way. Secretive does not always mean there's something subversive going on beneath the surface. It just means that they like their privacy. So next we have Sagittarius. Sagittarius aligns with the archer or the student. It's the fire of water. Its solar month is from the 23rd of November through the 22nd of December. It aligns with the hips and thighs, and the ruling planet is Jupiter. Some keywords for Sagittarius: optimism, freedom-loving, good humor, honest, straightforward, and intellectual and philosophical. Less in the way of like Virgo, where they're like seeking truth and they want to understand knowledge, and not philosophical in the way of like Pisces, where they want to imagine all of the possible scenarios, and we'll talk about that in a minute. In this case, we're talking about philosophical in the sense of seeking truth. And that's something that's very important to them. They want everything to make sense and be straightforward and be simple. And so at times they can be irresponsible. I should have put reductionist on here. Sagittariuses love to reduce things beyond the point where it's helpful. They can be blindly optimistic, careless, irresponsible. So the challenge here is for them to expand their experiences. That's something that some might excel at, some might struggle with, and that comes from the ruling planet Jupiter. So this is the sign of networking. of reaching out and gathering information, you know, like I said, seeking truth. Little bursts of energy, think little bursts of energy in multiple places, like putting a little bit of time here, a little bit of time there, a little bit of time there, hoping that one of those many things will flourish and grow into, you know, a bigger bonfire, which will then attract other people, you know, because that's Sagittarius's prime objective, is to surround themselves with people that they like and that they get along with. They're very big on community and interaction with others. They bring the passion and the fire to the party that helps bring people together. They have, you know, think of the archery, right? So they have arrows that once they shoot them out, they provide light for others, you know, the final active energy before we enter the dark days of midnight. So this is the last stage of the third quadrant. So this is like the end of twilight. So it's like the setting sun. It's, you know, think of like waking dreams, living in a physical way and a spiritual way at the same time. And actually, you know, finding the spirituality of like science, for instance, like being so intellectual, you become philosophical. So philosophical, you become intellectual. They are very easily able to expand and have these great philosophical experiences while still staying firmly rooted to their physical form. So like groundedness and ascendedness at once, or a spiritual balance, like a dying flame. Okay, Capricorn. Capricorn is another sign that gets a bad rap, and also for a pretty good reason. They tend to be very hard to get along with. But again, it depends on who you are and the kind of people you are. So it associates with the sea goat or the father. Solar month is from the 23rd of December through the 20th of January. It aligns with the knees, and its ruling planet is Saturn. Some of the keywords are practical, prudent, ambitious, disciplined, patient, humorous, reserved, but traditional, which can also be a good or a bad thing. And the con is fatalism, pessimism, you know, misery. So Capricorns often will bring the whole room down by being like, well, don't you guys want to just get some more work done? Like, why are you all sitting around talking about this TV show when we could be working? You know, that kind of thing. They have the challenge of winning respect. They also have to combine traditional and original approaches, or they wind up being frustrated. Like if they're very traditional people, they'll start to think that the world is going to heck. You know, they'll think, oh, the world is going to heck. You know, and that'll make them more fatalistic or pessimistic. Whereas if they embrace the new changes and new ways of doing things, but still stay true to their more traditional selves, then they'll be a lot more satisfied with the state of the world. So Capricorn is the sea goat, can dive down deep into the ocean and scale the highest, greatest heights of mountains as a goat, right? So it's cardinal earth, but it's in the quadrant of air, so it's the earth of air. Its natural direction is to move through building new foundations, turning over soil, growing mountains, the creation of land as it rises through the water. With Capricorn, people will tend not to even try something because it's safer to sit still. They might be afraid to fail. This is the path of commitment because Capricorns have to be committed to not be inert. If they're not committed, they don't get anything done. So Capricorn also in many ways represents commitment. Capricorns would rather take baby steps, making safe moves only, and they have both a fear of success and of failure. So what if I'm not good enough, and what happens if I am good and I have to do this more and more and more and more, and then it takes up all my time and then I'm not satisfied with life anymore, right? So they worry about both sides of the spectrum. It represents ambition, but also a base level of fear that results in small steps forward, each one being very carefully calculated. Everything is carefully analyzed, and when a goal is in mind, if a goal is not in mind, then they have no reason to act. They would never act just for the sake of it. They have to know where they're headed and that the actions they're taking will help them get there, or they're not interested. Think like that trope where there's two angels on each shoulder and each gives conflicting advice. you know, good and order can be used to ensure that all actions that they take are beneficial, but it also results in anxiety and self-doubt and possibly self-loathing. People with Capricorns prominently placed in their chart often have a lot of self-loathing, and that can be a great source of issues between them and other people, because when do you know people to respond well to someone who doesn't like themselves? Right? If you don't even like yourself, how are other people supposed to like you? So that is the energy of Capricorn. Aquarius is the ruling sign of this last quadrant. Aquarius is the air of air. It's fixed air. It associates with the water bearer or the exile, and that's really interesting if you think about it, right? Because it's almost like Aquarius and Scorpio should be swapped, because Aquarius is the water bearer, where, you know, Scorpio is a scorpion. It's like, well, how do those really make sense? But if you think about it a lot, it starts to make sense. Aquarius aligns at the ankles. Its ruling planet is Uranus. It used to be Saturn, but it switched to Uranus and we discovered it, and Uranus makes a lot more sense. Because Uranus, and we'll talk about the planets, but Uranus represents, you know, like social media and the collective consciousness and all of the resources available to people today. And Aquarius is all about caring about the big picture. Some keywords for Aquarians: friendly, humanitarian, honest, loyal, original, inventive, independent, intellectual, intelligent, eccentric. So think with Aquarius now, we're not talking about, you know, so intellectual it's philosophical or so philosophical it's intellectual. We're talking about specifically like the science, soulless science, science devoid of the irrational side of life, devoid of the exploration of the human experience, and therefore also, you know, the mysteries. So those are some of the cons, right? Unemotional, detached, perverse at times, because they would think, well, this is the most logical thing, and I don't care about people who are being irrational. It can be contradictory, intractable, unpredictable. Again, it can, because they have a lot of logic going on behind the scenes, and it's almost like a running calculation, and so it might not be clear what they're going to do, because they won't act in the way that other people would act. It'll take people off guard, and in that way they can be incomprehensible. And again, because they have a disconnect between their emotions and their thoughts. Like Aquariuses are the types of people who would rarely act on what they're feeling and would prefer to instead consider what is rational and act that way. But then behind the scenes, down in their subconscious minds, those emotions that they are detached from can have more effects on them than they realize. The challenge of this sign is seeking new knowledge and breaking down old ideas. So think about understanding the potential of the human race. What could we be as a race if certain parameters are met? You know, X, Y, Z, lovingness, givingness. If we find the exact right parameters, then the human race will excel and become a thriving society that benefits all. They're not fans of commitment or community. They prefer to stand out. They like different quirky kinds of groups where they can easily blend in and go unnoticed, because they tend to be a little different in how they act and how they come to and how they decide what is and is not moral. They're less likely to say this is moral because it feels right, and more likely to question what most people would consider to be moral actions. Many will think that Aquariuses are aloof or standoffish, but really they're just detached. They don't really care about things going on around them. They don't really care about the things that are happening on a small scale. Instead they care about things that happen on a large scale. They seek enlightenment. They seek detachment from the world, more kind of like a Buddhist approach to spirituality. They can be selfish on an individual level, but they would still seek to better the world as a whole. So Aquariuses are not the kinds of people who go down to homeless shelters and give bread and soup to homeless people. They wouldn't want to donate their time that way. Instead, they would be focused on whether or not the homeless shelter is actually effective, whether or not the homeless shelter actually does a good job of providing food to homeless people, or is there a better way of doing things? They're more focused on the global picture. How can they impact many people and change the world so that it's really, truly a better place for everyone? So last but not least, we have Pisces. Pisces is a very watery sign. It's mutable water. It's the water of air. So it's very mystical and dreamy. Associates with the fish or the dreamer. Its solar month is the 20th of February through the 29th of March. It aligns with the feet. And the ruling planet is Neptune. Some keywords for Pisces: imaginative, sensitive, compassionate, empathic, kind, selfless, intuitive, sympathetic, philosophical, transcendent, dreamy, but also, the con side of that is that they tend to be very escapist, idealistic, secretive, vague, undisciplined. They're the kinds of people that have all these great ideas, but tend not to be able to follow through and see those ideas through. The challenge is of discerning between illusion and illumination, between knowing exactly where the dream stops and reality begins. They're very mystical, as I said. They're very receptive. They're very sensitive to all things spiritual and magical. So many people who are empaths have Pisces prominently in their chart. Pisces is the gateway to leaving the mortal, the human, or the ego behind. It's very big on self-sacrifice, sometimes to the point of martyrdom. Pisces usually, it's not because they want to be known as somebody who gives back. That's more Aquarius, right? We just talked about that. Pisces really, really wants to make a difference and benefit people, and sometimes it's to the point where their own well-being is affected. Pisces let other people step on them. They're the doormats of the world. They tend to get into abusive situations. They give more of themselves than they can to other people. They're very selfless, to the point where they allow other people to hurt them, and they sometimes seek out situations that hurt them. So they're chronic abuse victims. They are those who think that they can heal anybody in the whole world, but never really focus on taking time to replenish their own stores. Pisces rarely give up on people. They see the best in everyone, and even when everyone else around them is saying, this person is terrible, why do you talk to them, they're the last ones to lose faith in them. They see the aura and the divine spark of every person. That's why it's ruled by Neptune. Neptune aligns with the collective unconscious, which we'll talk about. And it's kind of like, the world as a whole. The world is a system. How do you feel about all of humanity? So we'll talk about that. So Pisces, they are secretive, but not in the same way that Scorpios are. In this case, it's not because they don't want people to know them. It's because they are very complex and they might not even understand their own emotions. So it's very hard to understand them or why they're feeling what they're feeling. They like to escape to their own complex worlds where everything is nice and fine, fantasy worlds, daydreamers, that sort of thing is all Piscean energy. Lastly, we have Ophiuchus. I am wondering if I should have chosen a different color font on this gray, but hopefully you can read that. The associations for Ophiuchus are the serpent bearer, or the mysteries. So Ophiuchus is a sign, like I say in the first lecture, that has been in the Zodiac for a long time, but planets used to only pass through Ophiuchus for a couple days. So Ophiuchus was pretty much considered, all of the energy from Ophiuchus was pretty much considered to be a part of Scorpio, which is fine. Just like how we didn't know the high resonance planets existed, we used other planets to align with each of the signs because, we didn't know the higher resonance planets existed. So once we found them and the human race evolved to the point where those planets can have an effect on us, the same is happening right now with Ophiuchus. So Ophiuchus is a new sign, a new old sign. It's finally has enough, the planets spend enough time within Ophiuchus that it matters, that it's relevant, and that we need to talk about it. And that probably has been the case for the past 100 years or so, but in the same way that many people are slow to accept astrology as a science, many people are, with the scientific basis of astrology, they're slow to admit that astrology might actually have some merit. The people who are big astrology enthusiasts are slow to admit that astrology might need to evolve or change. I don't understand that, personally. If you believe in the scientific basis of astrology, then you should hypothetically care about where the planets actually are in the night sky. I mean, if you go on one of those popular astrology sites right now and look and find out what constellation the sun is in, it's going to say that it's in, what time of year is it? It's going to say that it's in Cancer. It's going to say that it's July, right? So it's just going into Leo. But if you look in the astronomy tool, like if you look in Stellarium, it's dead in the middle of Cancer. So that should matter if you believe that the pull of the planets actually has an effect. Because when they characterized this energy initially, many thousands of years ago, then the sun would have been in Leo at this time. But it's not because of planetary precession, which I talked about in the first lecture. So we have to consider that astrology is something that has to change and adapt in the same way that our solar system changes and adapts. And as it becomes more complex and we add more things to it, that just mirrors the fact that humanity is evolving and becoming more complex as well. So in this case, Ophiuchus is a sign that has associated mythologies. It's the serpent bearer. It's the serpent who goes out and captures the actually, I should delete bearer. That doesn't make sense. That's probably copied from another slide. I'll correct the slides before I send them to the website. But it's the serpent that kidnaps one of the mythological beings from the night sky, and then another mythological being from the night sky. Another person has to go and kill the serpent and take that person back. So that's the energy of Ophiuchus. It aligns with the soul. That's the part of the body it aligns with, because we've now evolved enough as a species, humanity has evolved to the point where there are signs that govern the way that our metaphysical selves manifest. So we're talking not about, when we get into medical astrology eventually, if somebody has a lot of signs in Ophiuchus, then they might, so if someone has like Pisces prominently in their chart, they might have issues with their feet. Like, for instance, I have Pisces prominently in my chart, and I have a skin condition on my feet that requires me to like take extra special care of them and use special lotions and stuff, or else they get really hard and cracked. So that's how medical astrology works. You can use someone's chart to determine what types of health issues they're going to have and make preparations for those before they become extreme. With Ophiuchus, if somebody had that prominently in their chart, then the kinds of things that they would be prone to are ailments of the metaphysical self, like misalignment of chakras. Okay, for instance, I've got to plug in my computer. Man, this has been a really tough video, and Mercury's not even retrograde yet, so I am really not looking forward to the Mercury retrograde coming up on Friday. Anyway, so keywords for Ophiuchus. This has been really challenging. I have had... let's see, I've done about 100 star charts, give or take now. And at first, when I first learned astrology, I used the popular sites. I got the data from those sites and did star charts, and none of them were accurate. Many people told me completely off, not really even close to things that would apply to those people's lives. Then I started to use accurate data from an astronomy tool, and immediately everyone was like, oh wow, that's like crazy. And the things that you say are incredibly accurate. They could not apply to just any person. So from having enough people who have Ophiuchus prominently in their chart, from figuring out what that energy must be and doing readings, one-on-one where they help me understand what this energy is, I have successfully characterized the influence of Ophiuchus. This is just very basic. It might change over time. Ophiuchus is not well defined because it's been rejected for no real reason for so long. It aligns with spirit as an element, so it doesn't really fit into the element, the fire of water, this or that. It's just spirit. In the star chart, it is in the same slot, the same house as Scorpio, and they both together rule that house. And all of the transformation qualities, the phoenix element that has been historically attributed to Scorpio, which makes no sense to me at all based on the people I know who have prominent Scorpio placements, that energy should actually have been attributed to Ophiuchus all along. So Ophiuchus represents adventure, mystery, also secrets, right? Because that's associated with mystery, and that's a theme of that house. Relentlessness, seeking truth, unbiased. It represents philosophy, expansion, motivation, and I would also argue chaos. And then some of the cons would be restlessness, changeability, moving without direction, and chaos. So people who are Ophiuchuses tend to be very spontaneous. They don't like to sit still for very long. They have to be constantly exploring, constantly having a new adventure, discovering something different, and they're very challenged by being decisive and grounded because they want to go off in all these different directions, and it's hard for them to stay focused on, okay, this is what I need to do, and this is the task at hand. I listed the ruling planet as the Kuiper Belt. The Kuiper Belt is the outer edges of our solar system. There is a bunch of asteroids and like planets, small dwarf planets, like Pluto's a dwarf planet. There's a bunch of those actually that may in fact take a role in astrology in the future as we learn more about them, and then we can slowly characterize them. And the idea is, again, as humanity evolves, we become more easily influenced from all of the different things going on in our solar system. So the Kuiper Belt is the farthest most point in our solar system, and outside of that, the sun's gravity is so weak that it's not a part of our solar system. It's not orbiting around our sun or anything. So this is the farthest most reaches out into space. Ophiuchus aligns with, comets, dwarf planets found in the Kuiper Belt. As I said, it represents mystery, adventure, the capability of humanity to seek truth and to crave truth above all else. Ophiuchus was the first doctor. Oh yeah, so here, I do have in my notes, I have it. So Ophiuchus was the first doctor who tried to resurrect Orion and failed because of Hades' appeal to Zeus to leave death with the dead. So there's a theme of death associated with Ophiuchus as well, but not like a sad theme of death. It's to do with like, should we try to resurrect this person? No, because the dead are at peace, right? So it's that idea of spirit passive, like the peace that comes when someone passes on. Ophiuchus aligns with the Phoenix, like I said, which is often mistakenly attributed to Scorpio. It represents transformation and rebirth. The Phoenix is a bird of every element. Often people think that the Phoenix is a bird of fire because of the being reborn from the ashes thing, but that's not really traditionally the case. The Phoenix is strong, like crazy strong, can carry weights much larger than its own body weight, like Earth. The Phoenix tears heal people, so that's water. It's reborn from its ashes, and its fire is so hot, that's the fire. And then it's a bird, it flies, so that's the air. So it's a bird of every element, which means it really represents spirit. Ophiuchus represents the connection between spirit active and the four main elements representing life, and spirit passive representing death. So Ophiuchus is like the constellation that bridges the gap between the constellations that are governed specifically by life energy and those that are governed by death energy, those that transcend space and time and exist on a higher plane. Ophiuchus sun signs are often very motivated people, but only when they feel like they are exploring new paths. If they feel like they're doing the same thing over and over again, they're not interested. They're independent. They're naturally very fair. They see all perspectives very easily. They tend to be unbiased and empathic. They can be secretive and mysterious, but in this case, it's not secretive like they have some ulterior motive, which is often the case for Scorpios. It's secretive more just like they don't know what they want either. So they don't really know themselves because they're very changeable, kind of like, like the wind, but not like in the same sense as, like a Libra. They're not as gullible or easily manipulated as an air sign. Much of the transformation, like I said, that's attributed to Scorpio, is actually found here within the chaos of the disordered and mysterious Kuiper belt. So the Kuiper belt is like where planets are formed. Things smash into each other, they become dwarf planets, and that's literally where planets are formed. And that's how all of our planets formed. At one point, our entire solar system looked just like the Kuiper belt. And then they slammed into each other, created planets, and all of the asteroids, kind of exist in one place, and now the planets exist in another, and they're not on a collision course or anything because they already were on a collision course many thousands, tens of millions of years before humanity existed. When things become stagnated, Ophiuchuses would lose their patience. They might become very frustrated. Sometimes they would even become resentful of those around them who they would perceive of as boring. So Ophiuchus, people with Ophiuchus in their chart definitely don't want to participate in any kind of small talk or mundane discussions. Everything is philosophical. Everything has meaning. Everything is expansive and helps them grow as a person. They can grow from anything at all. So that's Ophiuchus. It's taken me a long time to be able to characterize it, but I feel fairly confident in these characterizations. If we wind up doing your chart and you have a prominent Ophiuchus placement and you want to just come in and be like, hey, I also think maybe these qualities should be considered, then hey, I'm more than willing to accept that kind of feedback because, like I said, this is my characterization. Ophiuchus, as far as I know, has not been characterized as a zodiacal sign. Most people reject that it even exists and stick to the standard solar house way of doing things, which in my experience is not accurate. So it's up to you how you want to go about it. All of the information about each sign is the same. All the information about each planet is the same. So you can still do all of these lectures, skip the part where I do the stellarium tutorial, and teach yourself astrology that way if that's what you would like to do. It's up to you. And that's it. That's the zodiac. So we have finished the first of our lectures here. I wanted to do a demo explaining how to fill out the wheel. I provide a chart that I actually use myself when I do readings for people. So as a part of the homework this time around, you're going to have to fill out your own chart. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that up and show you how it's done. So let me bring up Stellarium. Do I have it open? Yeah, no, that's a screenshot. Okay, so let me just pause this and get everything up, and then I will start it up again. Okay, so this is the app Stellarium. I hope you have it installed, and this is the chart right on the top of Stellarium. This is the chart that I will be that you'll be able to get in the homework documents, which are on our website. What I do is I just use the selection tool and I just copy all of these things into the appropriate house, and you can see that they're numbered. So the way that you find the ascendant is this. Okay, so let's just do my chart, which is good because I don't even have a digital copy of it. So you first open this window to get the location. I was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania. That's why I talk like a valley girl. And I was born on September 9th, 1991. I was born at 6:54 p.m. 6:54. Lots of weird coincidences in my birthday, which I love because I'm big on numerology too. Maybe I'll do a lecture series on that. Okay, so once you put all that information in, I like to confirm that the information is correct by copying it then into the chart. So I'll say, this is for Tehillah, Firewind, and I'll make that underlined in bold, and then on the next line I'll put, Scranton, PA, and then 9/9/91, 6:54 p.m. Okay. So my solar month, cut it off. It always does that. You got to be careful with this. Doesn't matter for this example, but yeah, paint is hard to use sometimes. But my solar month is Virgo, so people often think I'm a Virgo, even though I am actually only half Virgo. And I have Leo prominently in my chart. Okay. I will often also put the moon phase down here, and I look up the retrograde planets. You can identify retrograde planets in Stellarium, but for some of the slow-moving planets, it can be very difficult. Calculating when the retrogrades will occur, it has not been affected by planetary precession. The only thing that is affected is which signs the planets are in. So you can use, I have a website that I'll make sure I give you the link to get the retrogrades, and I'll show you how to do that last. For now, let's start by filling in the zodiacal signs. So if I look over here at the east, if I come down here at the bottom, there's a couple buttons. This turns on the constellation lines. This turns on the labels. And then what I like to do is open this this like settings tab. It's the third one down, and I go to the star lore, and then you can actually turn on the constellation boundaries. So now you know exactly where one constellation ends and the next begins. So if you look over here on the eastern horizon at this time, Aquarius appears to be rising, but when we get rid of the ground, we actually see that Pisces is also just starting to rise. And based on certain times of year, you'll have like 2 or 3 signs that are rising. It's up to your discretion if you want to include both of them or not. I usually do include both of them. I'm primarily a Pisces rising, but I have a little bit of Aquarius in my rising sign as well. And the way that I might denote that in my chart is just by putting a squiggly line. So my chart's a little complicated. I probably should have picked a simpler chart. You can see the chaos in my chart right away. But so Pisces is the first one, so I'll just copy that, and then that goes in the first house here. And then what I might do is, so Aquarius comes next, it's going to go in this one, to denote that I have a little bit of each as a rising sign, and my houses are like half and half, and that's something I should think about. I'll just like put a squiggly line here, like, okay, so it's like split, and Aquarius is a little bit of a rising sign too. This is how you know that, like, too, that your chart is super accurate, because everything is on a spectrum, right? So you're taking into account the fact that everything is on a spectrum, and that you know, if somebody's sun is in between 2 signs, then it's probably going to be influenced by both. So now that I've placed the rising sign, and that's why it's the most important one, I can place the rest of them just by knowing where they go with relation to each other. So if you think back to the flat wheel, I'm just putting everything in order around the chart. Sagittarius, Scorpio, Libra. I actually created this myself. The flat wheel in the background is a chart that everyone uses and is not copyrighted. And then these signs I found on some website, and I changed all the colors and everything. So you don't have to feel nervous using this in your own personal practice, or even submitting something like this to people. Like if you wind up doing astrology for money, like you could still give people this chart, and nobody's gonna come after you for copyright infringement, because like I said, I've changed it enough that it's my own. It's my own, and I don't care if you use it. Cancer, Gemini, Taurus, and Aries. Okay. So next I'm going to ask you to put the planets into your chart. That'll allow you to complete the chart, but we're not going to talk about the planets until next time. So don't get confused or bother trying to necessarily determine what the whole chart means, because until we talk about each of the planets, you're missing kind of like half of the picture. But for now, just do it, because then you'll have your chart. So as you're watching the next lecture, it'll be easier for you to follow along with what the planets do. So let's look. If we type Control Find, or Control F, and then we look for the sun, notice that my sun is like fully in Leo. But if you look at it, it's kind of a little bit between the 2 constellations. It's technically fully in Leo, but I'm going to exhibit some Virgo-like qualities in my sun sign as well, because it's in the transitionary phase. So what I would do to denote that, I'll copy the sun, and then I'll put it in Leo, but I'll put like a tiny nudge of it sticking into Virgo. So then I know, oh, it goes into Virgo a little bit. Let's see. So my moon sign is fully in Virgo, and it's a new moon. And it is if we go back a day, we can see it's a waxing new moon. So the new moon just ended. So copy the moon into Virgo. It's fully in Virgo. So put it right in here. And then I like to put in the bottom corner that it is a waxing new moon. Just starting to wax, not enough that you'd actually see any of it. So it still is the new moon. Otherwise, I'd put waxing crescent. Okay, so back over here, Mercury. Mercury is in Leo, and Venus is also in Leo, but it's close to the Cancer side, so I'm going to do the same thing with that I did with the Sun. So, and this is why I come off as so patronizing without trying to, because my Mercury's in Leo. Leos are very pompous. Sometimes I'll make them smaller so that they'll fit. So Mercury and Venus. And I'm going to stick the Venus just a little bit into the Cancer realm so that we know that it's right on the border. Okay, then we have Mars. Mars is in Virgo. That's why I'm so diligent, why I get things done better when I'm organized and I have a plan. That looks funky. There we go. Jupiter. Jupiter's in Leo. See why I make them smaller now? Because sometimes there's like a ton of them in one sign. I had one person that had every single planet in one sign. I was like, holy Cancer! Uranus. Oh, no, I missed Saturn. You don't have to do it in order, but it's easier for me to remember that I got them all. Saturn's in Capricorn. And I do, in fact, waste a lot of time being fatalistic. So, there you go. Makes complete sense. It's been a while since I looked at my own chart. Uranus is in Sagittarius. And if you start to do charts for a lot of people, you'll notice that, some of these higher resonance planets move very slowly. So based on what year someone gives you, you can often guess what signs their planets are going to be in. But it's always worth checking just to make sure. Neptune, yep, and Pluto should be in Libra. It's in Libra, but it's just a dash in this like other thing. The planets move only through this bottom corner, right? So that's how it used to be. So look at Ophiuchus. This is what I was talking about. So the planets used to move right along here, okay? And they might spend like a day or two at this corner of Ophiuchus, okay? Obviously, that's not really a big deal. But now the planets move through here. And they spend a significant amount of time in Ophiuchus, and sometimes they skip Scorpio entirely, or they, look at how small Scorpio is if their path takes them out here. So for that reason, I think it is important to consider that these two signs are really, two sides of one house, two sides of one coin. So let's put the last couple in. So Neptune is in Sagittarius. And Pluto is in Libra. Okay. So if a planet is in Ophiuchus, what I would normally do, like say if my Pluto was in Ophiuchus, what I would normally do is I would copy it and put it like out here. And then I would put like Ophiuchus, and I would just write it in. Right. So then that's what I would do, but it's not, so we don't need to do that. There is one other sign that I haven't talked about that's barely on the zodiac. For people who live in the Southern Hemisphere, you might find Serpens often has, oh, this is Serpens, that's what it is. For people in the Southern Hemisphere, sometimes the planets go right through Serpens. I don't know why I put the label over there. This is Serpens. Serpens reflects the part of space that has the most number of identifiable galaxies, like other galaxies. So the energy from Serpens is otherworldly. People who are star children, who are like their past lives happened on other planets, often have a lot of signs in Serpens. I only know 2 people that have signs in Serpens. One is in the Northern Hemisphere, and he has a couple signs you know, right along the border here. And the other one is in the Southern Hemisphere, and she has a bunch, like, fully in Serpens. So you might have to consider that constellation as well, but it just depends if you're doing charts for people that live around you or you're doing charts for people who live all over the globe, because when people live in different locations, that affects where the planets appear in the sky. And that's it. So that's how you create the star chart. So now what I would do next is write some of the keywords that I talked about in here. So, you know, since I have Leo, I could put, you know, self-expression. And I could put self-expression and extroversion or something. Then I might say, because my moon is in Virgo, analytical. Analytical. And what else? My emotions are very rational emotions. Okay, so I might write something like that, and I'd fill out this whole note section just with keywords that I then use to help me create the final full reading of the chart. So this is the first step. So if you can do this, then you're in good shape. So give it a try. I hope that you guys can figure out how to do it. I do have homework for this lecture. I'd like for you to try to copy the signs into your chart. Just the signs. If it's a lot of work, just do the signs for now, and you can add the planets in next time, and we'll look at the planetary retrogrades next time as well. And if you have any questions, please drop a comment, shoot us an email. I also have the associated readings in the astrology book, so I'd continue to read that. It's a very good alternate perspective on some things. A lot of it's reinforced, some of it's different, so check it out and let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, from everyone here at the Coven of the Open Mind, blessed be.